For me, this project began almost 5 years ago when I started to reimagine the presentation of Chinese Buddhist art here in the Freer. The resulting reinstallation, now on view upstairs, and I encourage all of you to go upstairs and actually look at the art on display in the Freer, represents the second phase of a complete reconceptualization of our presentation of Chinese art at the Freer. Like other galleries in the series, this one commenced with a fresh appraisal of the entire collection, which is in fact one of the most important collections of Chinese art outside China. And it also began with a commitment to foregrounding the very best pieces, letting them frame the narrative that we present to the public in the galleries. The current installation meaningfully juxtaposes stone sculpture from the 6th and the 8th centuries. As you can see in the image here on the screen, the over-life-size cosmic Buddha, which by now you should recognize from all the digital renderings you've looked at, is truly the centerpiece of the room, despite the fact that it lacks its head and hands. The decision to foreground this image and really place it at the heart of the installation was determined by the importance of the piece. Despite its now fragmentary appearance, this is in fact one of the most remarkable Buddhist images to survive from ancient China. Created during the late 6th century, the figure possesses overwhelming strength as a sculptural object, with the presence of almost a superhuman body subtly showing through the thin garments that cover it. Much more significant, however, and you've seen a little bit of this already, is the fine narrative detail that completely fills the surface of the object. I might note in passing that the installation that the current one replaces had this Buddha shoved in a corner where you could really see only about 1/4 of the surface. Now, in the center of the room, you can appreciate it from all sides. In large part, unrelated to the cut of the garment, these patterns should instead be seen as kind of magical emanations from within the sculpture, therefore its identification as Vairochana, the cosmic Buddha, illustrating the Buddhist cosmos. Found only on a small handful of sculptures worldwide, such designs represent a visual library of seminal subjects and styles of late 6th century Chinese Buddhism that are nowhere more varied and complex than on the Freer piece upstairs. I'll return to this topic at the close of my comments. As a result, this sculpture has been the subject of a great deal of writing, including a PhD dissertation and a book-length monograph, in addition to dozens and dozens of scholarly books and journal articles. The importance of research and academic discourse concerning this piece increased exponentially more recently. The piece entered the collection in 1923, but in 1996, a small group of related stone sculptures was found in a cache burial in China's Shandong province. Many of these pieces were in fact exhibited here at the museum in a special exhibition in 2003 entitled Return of the Buddha. What's brilliant about the design of the viewer, and here I'm showing you one example where I've exploited this, is that I can easily make comparisons between pieces here in the collection with pieces that have archaeological provenance or illustrate similar themes or subjects in their surface treatment. Despite all of this importance, which is easily recognized within the scholarly community, sadly, I watch average museum visitors easily walking by this piece. Traditional means of in-gallery interpretation, typically static labels with limited word counts, don't really help in efforts to make such incredibly interesting objects come alive. Thus, when I first spoke with Adam and Vince about scanning the cosmic Buddha, and I think this was one of the first ones in the project actually, I was seeing the 3D project as a vehicle for engaging the public on the interpretive side of the equation. I also thought that it might be a useful way to share copies of our sculpture with, say, Chinese academic colleagues via 3D prints, allowing them to make comparisons with our piece and hopefully encouraging them to make prints of their archaeologically recovered objects with clear provenance available to me for further study. But the tool has ultimately facilitated so much more. Actually, I'm going to turn the hotspots off for a second. Access to the scans made it possible for me to undertake the first comprehensive survey of the narrative scenes that cover the sculpture's surface. And the results of that can be seen here. I'll talk about what you're looking at in just one second. At first inspired by the desire to lead visitors to the framed stories that cover the sculpture, also sharing the religious text that inspired the scenes, and offering supplementary interpretation, I soon saw that this tool was allowing me to discover things that previous researchers simply hadn't been able to see. And it also allows me to share these things in really interesting ways. What you're looking at here is the sculpture with hotspots. We recognize those orange pinheads. But as we were developing the capacity of the tool, I asked if maybe, in addition, for the cosmic Buddha at least, in addition to the hotspots, if we could add hot zones that would allow me to label individual sections. So that's what these different colors represent. Each color is a different unit of an overall story and provides an entrance point into more and more detailed information. Consequently, what I found, thinking of this as essentially a capture device for sharing information with visitors or scholars, all of a sudden I was seeing that this incredibly rich and detailed data set was allowing me to facilitate completely new research. It also has helped guide a new research project that's being undertaken by our geologist, Janet Douglas, who is focusing on the stone, that is its source, possibly even identifying ultimately its quarry in China, the original carving, the weathering and other changes of the surface over time, as well as more recent recutting that the scans have made readily visible. Thus, a tool that was initially viewed as a recorder has become incredibly useful as an inspiration for further study. I guess I was a little greedy because I asked for another special thing for the cosmic Buddha. This is what we're calling an unwrap, where what we've done digitally is essentially take the garment off the surface of the Buddha according to those scenes that we were just looking at in 3D and laid them out flat. In a way, and here I have to really, again, say thank you to Ralph Wiedemeyer, who conceived of this and executed it with such beauty and clarity. I especially like this because, in a way, it digitally recalls the traditional Chinese method of studying such complex three-dimensional objects, which is via two-dimensional ink rubbings on paper, where three-dimensional objects are essentially transformed into a two-dimensional image through the application of ink, thereby also highlighting the contrast, black and white, between raised elements and incised elements. I said at the opening of my remarks that I think the complexity of this object probably suggests that it was designed as a teaching tool. Dr. Clough mentioned this in his comments as well. I can almost imagine the abbot of the temple that was home to this image standing beside it, reciting the inspiration for all of the different imagery on the piece. I would say that the Smithsonian X 3D viewer, in a way, is allowing us to play that role now in a 21st century context, telling all sorts of stories and illustrating the profound significance that underlies the creation of this piece. In closing, I encourage you all to go upstairs and see the object itself, which, again, as Dr. Clough mentioned, doesn't replace the utility of the viewer, but is a complementary experience to the kind of exploration that's possible through this new tool. Thank you all very much for coming.